Punjabi Hari Gopijana Balava Girivara Dari Gopijana Balava Girivara Dari Swadanandana Rajajana Swadanandana Rajajana Jamuna Tera Manachari Jamuna Tera Manachari Radha Madhava Navihari Jiran Madhava Vichanava Girivaradari Vichanava Girivaradari Suranandana Rajajana Jana Suranandana Rajajana Jana Jamana Tira Tira Manachari Jamana Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Hey Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopijana Balava Girivara Jani Gopijana Balava Girivara Swaranandana Rajajana Ranjana Swaranandana Rajajana Ranjana Jasana Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Manachari Jamuna Tira Manachari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Almost in tune. Radha Madhava ki jai.
Jai.
Jai. I just have to put this away. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gauranga.
Oh,
So, what's happening? You guys are all stuck together and you're all fighting one another now? Because you're seeing one another too much?
that's it.
Yep.
Okay. I was just thinking about this, and I think that this lockdown is it's like, and all the difficulties we have in associating, getting along, I think it's really good. And I want to tell a story because I think the story will help us. And I told it the other night on a class. I don't know. You probably weren't on that class. It was think it was an evening class. It would have been like 2 a.m. for you. So I was a full-time devotee, but no other business for about 30 years. And then, yeah, more or less around 30 years. I mean, pretty much full-time devotional service. And then after my wife and I decided we wanted to have a child, and then we got a little money for down payment for a house and from her parents. And so we bought a house and then kind of did all the things you do, put furniture in the house and cars and prepare for the baby and so forth. So we started a business to do that. And if you've ever started a business, especially when you're living in America and you have a mortgage and you're paying for 2 cars and you have a family, it's quite expensive. You have to work hard on the business. So that's what I did. And the harder I worked, the harder I worked. And the harder I worked, the harder I worked. And that's the nature of business. It's just you work hard. So that's what I did. And it was a totally new environment for me. It was no longer full-time devotional service. And sometimes the environment, it was just not good. And so at one point, the difficulties were so tough that I was almost feeling like I can't really be Krishna conscious in this situation. It was a little bit like that. And so there was a period of time I just thought, well, maybe I just won't be Krishna conscious in this situation. Maybe that's just the way it's going to be. Or there's a limit. In other words, the situation has its limit. How Krishna conscious I can be in this situation is limited by the situation. But I wasn't satisfied with that. And I think in my heart, I knew ultimately no situation can impede your bhakti, because Prabhupada said that. Although that wasn't my experience. My experience was, you go to Vrindavan, you're very Krishna conscious. You go out in the world and you try to support your family, make a living, and that's harder to be Krishna conscious, obviously. However, I had a realization. And this is an interesting realization, and I think we can apply it to your situation. My realization was that it was such a different environment that I had to play by different rules, so to speak. I couldn't just think and live and act like I did when I was a full-time devotee, because the environment was different. The rules were different. What I was having to deal with was different. So I had to have different strategies to be able to deal with it. If you're a full-time devotee living in a temple, you only need a few strategies, just like deal with your crazy mind and get yourself out of bed in the morning and just keep working all day, basically. But there's not a lot of outside influence that's attacking. It's more inside. So you kind of learn how to deal with it, and you have a lot of good outside influence. But in my situation, I had a lot of bad outside influence. And so this was like a new thing, and how to deal with this and how to process it. And so I knew there was a way. I didn't really know how, but I knew there was. So I began praying to Krishna, give me insight, give me inspiration. And he would give me insight, yes. He would direct me to read certain things. He would direct me to certain people who would give insight. And so gradually I was learning how to adapt to a new environment. And I was becoming very strong because the environment required new strategies, new ways of thinking. It required me to be, maybe you could say I had to chant better rounds. If you're a full-time devotee, you don't chant good rounds, you'll survive. But if you're, you're working in the world and you're associating with a very materialistic environment, it's harder if you don't chant good rounds. You'll get more effective. Of course, you could say, well, I go in Sankirtan, I need to chant good rounds. And that's true. I don't deny that. But this is a little different. So something happened where Krishna started showing me, I don't remember the details of exactly what I was thinking and how it was happening, but maybe that'll come to me later. But Krishna was showing me how in this situation, which was objectively not conducive for being Krishna conscious, I could adjust my thinking, I could adjust my behavior and attitudes and understanding in a way that I believe, in retrospect, that those difficulties made me better and made me stronger because I learned how to deal with them. And if I didn't go through those difficulties, I never would have had to learn how to deal with them. And perhaps I would not have been fortunate enough to experience the strength that I gain from going through some of these challenges. So then I was thinking about this idea, you're locked up, you're all together. A lot of families are having problems because they've never been together so much. And they realize maybe by being together, maybe they realize they don't like one another so much. Maybe, they thought they liked one another because they didn't see one another that much. Something like that. Or they're getting on they like one another, but they're getting on one another's nerves. So relating to this situation, I was thinking, well, when you have people and the relationships, there's a little bit of friction and uneasiness or whatever the problem is, it's actually good if you try to take it forward and deal with it. Like, for example, my wife and I, she studied more, but we both studied with a certain company about marriages. And they say that if in a marriage you don't argue, it's a bad sign because there's things that you disagree with. You don't have to yell and scream, but they have to be discussed. And sometimes you might get a little upset, but you're bringing it out, you're discussing it, and that way you solve it. And so they said there's no problem with arguing if you know how to argue productively. There's just a problem arguing if you don't know how to argue productively. If you argue and put another person down, or you argue and you both come out upset, then what's the point? But they said if you don't learn how to argue, there's always going to be some differences that you have to work out. So you just have to learn how to argue in a healthy way. So I think the same situation is there. Maybe things are coming up, and I think it's good because it gives us an opportunity to deal with them, to talk about them. And then we have to start asking ourselves, okay, so how am I going to deal with this? Because maybe I've never dealt with this, or maybe this is something that's harder than what I normally deal with. So then now we're challenged. All right, to do the same thing I did. Well, what are the attitudes that I have to change? How do I have to see this situation differently? And also what I have to do, and especially you have to do in relationships, is you have to reflect. If I'm not acting well, or if I'm acting in a way, even if I think it's well, but it's upsetting somebody else, then I have to reflect, well, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? And why are they becoming upset? And sometimes what's interesting is you might say, I'm not doing anything wrong. And that may be true, but if somebody's getting upset, even if you're not doing something wrong, that's wrong because they're upset, right? It's like I teach something and nobody learns it. And then I say, but I taught you. I explained everything. It was perfectly clear, but you didn't learn it, so it's your fault. But maybe that's true, but my job is to teach you. So ultimately, it's my fault. I have to do it a different way so you learn. So I may not have done anything wrong, but somebody's upset. So I have to consider that. Okay, so these are all kinds of things I'm reflecting on. What am I doing that's upsetting? Why am I getting upset? Why are these situations becoming more tense? And then we start looking at ourselves. We look at one another, the relationships. We look at the community, and we start talking about these things and considering maybe there's attitudes, maybe there's ways of thinking that we never developed, that we didn't have to develop, but now we do. So the situation is good because we can become stronger, we can become closer, we could understand one another better. That's how I would look at it. That I would look at it like, you know, when there's difficulties like this, it's good because either you're going to just crash and everyone's going to kill one another, or you're going to figure out how to make it better. And obviously you want the latter, not the former. So the last thing I want to say, and then we could discuss, because I think maybe there's some questions and discussion before I say anything more. But there are, no matter what the problems are, there's always strategies how to deal with it. And we just may not know the strategies. And maybe these are things we have to learn that we don't know. But there are strategies. So sometimes when there's a problem, some people, they give up because they say, I don't know how to deal with this. And there was one actor, American actor, he said, and I think it's true, he said, whatever problem you have, someone wrote a book about it. So certainly there's books on relationships, certainly there's books on community development. Certainly, obviously, we have our own books. So it's not a problem if you're confronted with a situation you don't know how to deal with. It just means, okay, I have to find out. There is an answer. There is a way to make this better. Just because I don't know doesn't mean I give up. It just means I have to find out. And it sounds strange or foolish, but a lot of people give up at that point. They just think, I can't do this. I'm not this kind of person, or I can't work well in big communities or whatever. But in most cases, that's not true. Or even if it is true, there's still strategies you can use to be able to deal better. So I would say that's also something that could come out of this. Like maybe we'll learn better strategies. Maybe we figure out, well, we're having problems with one another because we do things this way, where if we did it this way, it wouldn't be. Maybe we're having problems with one another because we realize we don't actually understand one another. Or maybe we realize we're not close enough to one another. We thought we were close, but we're actually finding out we're not close. So these kinds of discoveries are good because by working through the difficulties, hopefully you become stronger. And so the worst thing you could possibly do when there's difficulties is just say, I don't want to deal with it. Leave me alone. I can't deal with it. I don't know how to deal with it. That's the worst thing you want to do. But rather you want to say, okay, these difficulties are good because we're going to work through them and then we're going to be better off. Kind of like rebuilding an engine. Your engine breaks down. You rebuild it, now your engine's like new. It's better than ever. So if things break down a little bit, if there's challenges, it's not bad. What's bad is to do nothing about it. Or what's bad is to say, well, this is just how it is. And it's not going to get any better. That's a problem. But if there's energy to say, okay, well, let's kind of look at this. Let's look at the dynamics here. What's going on and why? Is it a group dynamic? Is it individuals in the group that are creating the dynamic? How can we create better dynamics? How can we have more open discussions where people can express themselves freely without being judged or fear that there's going to be some negative repercussion? So that's what I would say as a group. I think you're asking the question about a group, but maybe you could apply the same thing in your individual homes, because I think it's the same principle. It's okay, how are we going to deal with this situation? We're kind of locked up in prison here. How do we deal with it? So I thought I could stop here for now, just to see if you want to direct me in another direction, or you have questions, because I don't know the specific details of the situation. So I could go to the chat and see if there's questions there, or you could just ask them.
I had a question if you ask.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I wondered if there was exercises that we could do that would if you're going through some difficulties and you want to improve, you want to make the relationships better, is there exercises that you could engage in which would
Well,
do it?
yeah. Yes. I have to see if I have this, but I'll give you an idea. What would be really nice is you do this exercise with everyone in the community. You do it in couples. So, at least the men and the men and the women and women, but I think the men and the women also, it could be done in a clean way. I think it'd be really good. I mean, it doesn't have to be man and woman alone. It could be 3 people together and one is just observing. But what you do is you have this list of questions. Like, I'll just give you an idea because you may be able to come up with questions like, what was the most difficult thing? What was your most difficult experience in your life? And what was the hardest thing you ever did? What was your greatest joy? What was it like growing up? What was your family like? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite food? You're just getting to know the person, know everything about them. And I have I have some questions. If you can't think of them, I have some questions. I just have to find. But so let's say you and I were doing it at Hoxaja. I'd be asking you those questions. Then you'd be explaining. So maybe we have 10, 20 questions. What was your greatest joy? It could be anything, how did you like brahmachari life? Why did you get married? What was, one of your biggest realizations? It could be anything. What's your favorite sport? What's your favorite song? Etc. And then after you explain it, then we do the same thing with me. Maybe the same questions, maybe different questions. And so we have this exchange, and these are questions which should be questions that would reveal a lot about the person that I didn't know. So let's say I tell a Hoxaja, well, when I grew up, my parents spoiled me. They gave me whatever I want, whatever I needed. They paid for everything. And I just was very irresponsible and this and that. And he would say, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that about you. You're not like that now. So maybe he would say, I appreciate that you were raised that way, but now I see you're thrifty and you're responsible, and say, oh, that was interesting to know you worked through that. So he knows something about me he didn't know. So it brings us a little closer. It's like we're friends. What did you do when you were a teenager? What did you like? And he starts telling me, I used to read these books and listen to this music, and I say, wow, I did it too. So all of a sudden we're like close. Or I never did that. Tell me about it. Bhakti Marg Swami does this in his public programs. He gets people together. He calls it Sakyam, making friends. The 9 processes, make friends. So questions, about which are a little more intimate, not revealing all your dark secrets, but intimate questions, so that you learn all these things about the devotees in your community that you never knew, and they're not like. Devotees don't need to keep them secret. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite fruit? What's your favorite song before you were a devotee? What was your favorite movie before you were a devotee? What's your favorite movie now? Your favorite book before you were a devotee? That's your favorite. Like that. So you're like learning, and you're getting to know one another. So that's a fantastic. That's one thing you can do. And another really fantastic thing you can do is you tell one another what you like about one another. So Alachua just says to me, so Mahatma Prabhu, what do you like about me? And I say, well, I like that you're funny, and I like your kombucha, and I like your tattoo, and I like, that you've done book distribution for so long, and so it's like, it's more therapeutic for me than it is for him. It's actually to get me closer to him. Of course, he'll like hearing about it, but it's actually better for me. You can start with, if you're married, you start with your husband and wife. Do this first. Reveal everything, ask all these questions, and then tell one another what you like about them. And you'll see it brings you really close. If, my wife and I did this. We did this before we went to India. We were doing these kinds of exercises. So this was like 7 months ago. So at that point, we were married 25 and a half years. And we were learning things about one another we didn't even know. It's like, you did that, or you like that. And it's like, the more you know about someone, the more you like them. And also, the more you know about them, the more you realize they're just like you. They're just another struggling human being, full of desires and so forth. So in any kind of community, I feel the more you can get to know everybody, the tighter the community becomes, more like a family. And I think I was thinking today that a lot of times when I travel, I try to create a family mood, like, okay, everybody come together, we're going to do this, or like, let's go outside, we'll barbecue potatoes, or, then I'll bring my guitar and I'll sing you my Prabhupada song or something, So it's kind of like, it like breaks down the hierarchy, we're all just coming together. And so it's not like, here's the seniors, they sit on the bigger rocks and around the fire, and here's the juniors, they sit on the little pebbles. And it's just like family. And I was thinking, like, whenever I do that, I can see that everybody really likes that. We just all feel like we're one unit. So when you get to know people like that, it creates that mood, like, you're like me, I'm like you. And even though you're a senior devotee, even though you're the temple president, or even though you're brahmachari, which are kind of like, you put these on a pedestal, or you're a sannyasi, I see this other side of you where you're human. And that's very important. And then, so the more you know about one another, the closer you come together. And so it creates more of this like family mood, like, there may be hierarchy, but on another level, we're family. And so the more, I think, especially now in Kali Yuga, families are pretty dysfunctional in many cases. So if we can create a nice family, it'll attract people, who never had a good family. That's why I became a devotee. I was, it was a temple full of men who became my god brothers, and I never had brothers. And I always wanted brothers. And I was like, wow, I just inherited like 12 brothers, in one night. This is so cool. And we're all hugging, and every morning we'd pay obeisances, we'd hug, and we're going through, everything together. And we all lived in one house. It was a one family house. And we had, I don't know, like 12 men and 5 women or something like that. We're a normal family, we live together. So we're like on top of one another all the time. It was definitely a family. And if I meet any devotees from those days, we'll feel very close because we were close. So I think that's important. So, and I've confirmed this from many things I've read, many things I've heard, many discussions I had. This one thing, the more you get to know somebody, the more you get to like them, generally. I mean, it could work the other way around, but I don't think, I don't expect that. So, we learn about, or maybe, maybe I don't like you so much, or something about you I don't like, but then you tell me your whole story and I go, oh, now I know why you're this way. And then I think, well, if I was raised like you, I probably would have killed myself by now. So I see you, and you're a devotee, and you're doing service, and I look at your life and I say, it's amazing. You had such a difficult life before Krishna consciousness, and it's amazing that you're still here and you're able to do all these things. So you know, and then you can look at the person and say, you know, I never liked the fact that you're like this, but now I could understand why you're like this. And now I understand that if that were me, I probably would have been like this. I probably would have been worse. So all these things, you know, help you because you're understanding one another. You're seeing why you do things. And you could even explain that. This is why I'm like this. Because of this and that. And that would help everybody, you know, understand one another. So that, both of those things, you know, asking the questions and then telling one another what you like about one another. It really builds, it's bonding, because my experience is that the more I like someone, the easier it is to work with them. The more I like someone, the more I see their good qualities. The more I like someone, I don't even notice their faults. I don't want to say the less I see of their faults. My experience is those I love, I don't see faults. I don't want to see faults. I can't see faults. It doesn't, it's not part of the relationship. So that's, you know, I had this saying, which is, I think it's a really good mantra, that criticism, how did I say it? It's like, criticism means no love. Because when you love somebody, I mean, okay, husband and wife is different, but generally, like with friends, when you really love them, you just don't see the bad in them. You like them so much. And it's the people you dislike, you tend to criticize. You just want to get back at them or pull them down or something, or, you know, expose them to the world, how bad they are. That'll make you feel good. But if you love someone, you want to protect them from all the people who would attack them, and you want to praise them and honor them. So the better our relationships are, the less there's going to be this tendency to want to criticize, condemn, put one another down, judge, etc. All the things that could destroy relationships and destroy a community. So if you write me an email, I could look. But I did a workshop, and we asked ourselves a lot of questions, like what's your greatest fear? What's your greatest joy, your greatest aspiration? What is it that you're afraid, that you're running from? Like all these questions we're asking ourselves. But when I was looking at them, I was thinking, well, there's a lot of questions you could ask another person. What, you know, what are your rules about this? Who are you prejudiced against most? Or what, you know, it could be anything. We were asking these kinds of questions. So it's very interesting, you know. And I think it'd be interesting also for the devotee who's asked those questions, because maybe some of the questions they haven't really thought about, like what's your greatest fear? I don't know. You know, what was your favorite movie before you're a devotee? Why was it your favorite? You know, when you first read Bhagavad Gita, you know, after your first shloka, what were you feeling? You know, just like I think it'd be inspiring for the devotees to speak, and inspiring to hear. And then we just get closer. You know, maybe after we do that, you know, we have a big sharing. Oh, so everybody goes around and says, what did you learn? I learned this amazing thing about Hokshaja Prabhu. I didn't know that before he was a devotee, he was like in this scene in London, and he was actually one of the gurus in this scene, and he showed me a clipping, you know, and it was like he was like 17 and he like had all these followers. Like I had no idea, you know, he was like the avant-garde artist of the, you know, Soho district, and you know, he did a, I didn't know this, but he did like a drawing for Paul McCartney, and Paul McCartney put it inside his album. You know, you know, probably that never happened, but if it did, it'd be like, wow, that's amazing. How did they do that? It'd be nice to know, right?
Yeah.
Like if you ask me, like Prabhupada Pran, if you talk to me, I could tell you something that would impress you. Because I lived in Los Angeles, and every big band came to Los Angeles, and I saw them all. You go down the list. Who did you see? Did you see Jimi Hendrix? Yeah. Did you see Cream? Yeah. Did you see the Beatles? Yeah. You did just go down alone. You see the Doors? Yeah. And you'd be like, oh, Prabhu, let me touch your feet. So, you know, it's like, wow, you saw all those bands. Every time I tell like people, you know, who are too young to see them, that I saw those bands, they're like, wow, you're so lucky. It's just you know, if you're into music, that's like trivia, interesting trivia. What was it like? B.B. King. Did you see B.B. King? Yeah. Did you see Jefferson Airplane? Yeah. Did you see this one and that one? Yeah. I was in San Francisco at the BN, you know, where all these bands played. Did you see Crosby, Stills and Nash? Yeah. You know, so things like that. Just, you know, maybe there's interest, you know, you're interested in music and I am, and there's this bond. So I think that would be a tremendous help. And then you have your big group and say, this is what I learned. You know, I learned this about Prabhupada. I learned this about this one. I learned this about that one. I never knew that. That's so amazing. I appreciate them 100 times more now. Because Mahatma Prabhu saw Jimi Hendrix. Wow. I appreciate him 100 times more. Hare Krishna. Elvin Bishop. There was a blues group called Elvin Bishop. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was like a blues guru. Prabhupada Pran, are you here? Is he on?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
You heard of Elvin Bishop before? Blues?
No, haven't. No.
You have? Yeah. He was like kind of big in America. Blues guitar. Yeah, I saw him. Prabhupada Pran, you have to look him up. Then you'll
Okay.
go, oh, okay, Elvin Bishop. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so, okay. So I'm going to stop and see if you have other comments or questions. Kind of maybe we can keep it on, we can keep the discussion in this general area now. And
Yeah, I had a question, please.
yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that makes relationships difficult is that we make assumptions about each other.
Yeah.
We think we know each other, and we think that they know us. And even when we try to improve, sometimes we make it worse because we're still holding on to certain parts of those assumptions. So just wondering, is there an attitude that we can develop which would replace that?
Well, there's a book called The Four Agreements. Have you ever heard of that book?
No?
Hold on a second. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Okay. I came across this book in a used bookstore. And Bhai Sheshika Prabhu used to always talk about the Four Agreements. A lot of people used to talk about it. It's like, what are the Four Agreements? Okay. Here they are. Number 1, be impeccable with your word. In other words, use your word to help people, uplift people. And don't say anything that's going to hurt anyone, or you don't say anything you're not going to do. Don't take anything personally. Then there's the third one, which is the answer to your question. Don't make assumptions. So the answer to your question is, what was your question? How can we get over making assumptions?
Don't make them.
Well, understand. I'll read what he says. It's interesting. This guy he's pretty good. He's God conscious. Find the courage. This is under don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Well, let's say someone's making assumptions about you. or you're making assumptions about someone else. You could express that, I make these assumptions and I want to talk, or I feel you're making assumptions about me and I want to talk. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. Sometimes he's talking here about assuming people are going to be a certain way, but it was never clearly communicated. So when I heard this this don't make assumptions agreement, I never read anything about it. I just heard it. I heard Vaisheshika, I think I heard Vaisheshika Prabhu say, 4 agreements, one of them, don't make assumptions. And then I started seeing how making assumptions is like normal. It's just the way we live. It's like the way our psychology is programmed. I come to Scotland. I think, okay, I'm going to Scotland, and I have all these assumptions in my head about how everything's going to go based on how it goes somewhere else. That's just natural, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Or you're a temple president, so I have the assumption that you're a temple president like all the others, so you're going to be a certain way. And then I get there, and it's different. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with it. It's just different. But because it's different and I had different assumptions, now I'm upset. Right? So assumptions, to me, in my experience, they're just totally normal ways of life. But it's really good to be aware of how problematic they can be, because assumptions creates expectations. And then, if you never had the expectation, you wouldn't be let down. But once you have the expectation, then you can get very upset. So that's the best way I can answer it, just in realizing how problematic assumptions are.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Assumptions also and prejudice, they're very similar. Because, we're getting this new devotee. Where is he from? Oh, he's from such and such a place. So you already have your assumptions about people from such and such a place, isn't it? Oh yeah, he's from Liverpool. Oh, okay, he's going to be like this. He's from Manchester. He's going to be like this. He's from Edinburgh. He's going to be like this. He's from Africa. He's going to be like this. It's like really dangerous and unfair. And, I get a lot of questions. And I realize that the answer, a lot of times, it's not like, how do I overcome this problem? The answer is more like, understand the ramifications of doing whatever it is you do. And by understanding the ramifications, you start to realize, oh, it's important I don't do this. Or it's important I do this. And so sometimes that's all you need, is just to understand, oh, when I make assumptions, this is what happens. When I don't make assumptions, this is what happens. Oh, that's so much better, because I can deal with people in a kinder way, or in a way that we get along better, or they appreciate, and so forth. So sometimes we had a class this morning, and a question came up about tolerance. And I said, how do I become more tolerant? And I said, we were talking about death. And I say, if you don't learn how to be tolerant, Krishna says you're not ready to die until you learn how to be tolerant. You're not going to be in a good position to go back to Godhead if you haven't practiced tolerance. So just by understanding a few things about tolerance and how it fits in the context of everything Krishna teaches in the Gita, you transcend duality through tolerance. It's essential quality of humility, and so on and so forth. Sometimes that's all you need. You just need to know, oh, this is what happens when I don't tolerate. This is what happens when I do. Okay, now I understand. Okay, so then I can start practicing it. So I would suggest what I do is when I make assumptions, I always catch myself. I go, oh, it's an assumption. And the funny thing about assumptions is we make them without asking the people if that's true. You know, okay, let's do a music thing. We can do it because we're musicians. We can do a music thing, right?
Okay.
So, okay, should we do guitars? I was just looking. I used to have a Gibson ES 335. I bought it when I was 16, used for $250. I just got a catalog that's new. It's $3,000 now, that guitar. Right? So this is a reverse assumption. I bought an imitation of that guitar. It was I sold the guitar. I forget the name of the company. I bought an imitation of that guitar. So my assumption was it's not going to be as good because that guitar I bought I bought it 10 years ago for $400. I can't remember the name of this company. It's a very interesting company. They make copies. Natural assumption was it's $400, how good it could be. That guitar was as good as my original Gibson. So that's assumption working in my favor. But it's natural you make an assumption, right? Now you can spend a lot of money on a guitar and it says Martin on it, and it's not that good. And you can spend less money buying another guitar made by another manufacturer who doesn't have a name, so they have to put more into their guitar. So you make the assumption, I bought a Martin guitar, you make this assumption, it should be good. I spend this much money, it should be good. And you play it and you think, this other guitar for half the price is actually better. It's just normal human psychology. So then I started realizing, I said, okay, wait a minute. When you do things, be careful about your assumptions because, okay, it's a Martin guitar, it should be good. It's a Sennheiser mic, it should be good. Sennheiser is making cheap old mics now. They never used to, but they're competing. So just because it says Sennheiser doesn't mean it's going to be good. And you learn that through experience. Oh, they have the low end, right? So, yeah, so I was just observing that in myself, all these assumptions you naturally make. And it's really dangerous to make them about people. It's not fair to them. And like you're saying, and then the people start improving, but we have all these assumptions we've already made about them. So when they improve, we don't even notice. We just notice our assumptions. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you view them through your assumptions rather than what they're actually doing. There's a lot of work that's been done on prejudice, helping people overcome prejudice and getting into their psychology and people realizing how much prejudice they have. It's incredible. But I'm going to tell you something that's really interesting. It's a kind of a side point, but I found it fascinating. So this lady was a news reporter, and she was reporting, I think the topic was racial discrimination. And so they put on these 3D glasses or some kind of glasses. And then they project a person on the screen who's different from you. And you do the movements, you become that person. So you're looking through the glasses and basically it's like you're looking at yourself, but you're a different person. You don't look the same, but you talk, that person talks. You move your hand, that person moves their hand. And let's say, Prabhupada, you come in the room and you'll look different and I'll talk to you and we'll be. And so she became a black person. And so it's like a virtual reality. So you become that, you forget who you are because now everything you're doing, everything you're seeing is not yourself. You're seeing it through that person. So somehow or other, you get the experience that you're actually that person. And so she was a black lady and she was interacting with other black ladies. So another person would come and in the virtual reality, that was a black lady, and they would just interact. And then they interviewed her afterwards. And she said, that was mind blowing. That just kind of like peeled away my prejudice because it was like I was now in the body of a black person. And I thought, yes, that's what Krishna says. By relating to other people, you become compassionate. By putting yourself in their place, you become compassionate. So I think that's like an essential, it's like an essential relationship tool to be able to like kind of become this other person. Like, what are you going through? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Rather than thinking, this is what you should think, this is what you should feel. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you.
That
And you
reminds
know, the
me.
other, can I say one more thing before I forget? One of the big challenges we have is we often expect other people to act in a certain way because that's the way we would act in that situation. But not everybody responds the same way I do because not everybody's me. So what would be okay for me to do or not do may not be okay for you to do and not do. But I judge you through my standards. And so I said, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes sense to you. It may make sense to you. So I have to have the ability to be inside your head and emotions sometimes to understand why you do and say things and why you feel things that I wouldn't feel. Because for me, I think, why would you feel that? That's strange or that's wrong. Rather than, okay, let me try to understand why you feel that. So I think that's super important relationship tool. And this is a big problem because I'm judging you based on how I would respond. Okay, you want to ask a question?
I was just going to say that to add to that point. Oh, sorry. It was when you did the forgiveness exercise, we had to play the person that we were having a problem with. And then when you put yourself in that person's shoes, you suddenly realize you get so much insight into where the person's at, and you're able to understand, whereas that barrier of hating the person or judging the person.
You could do that also as a exercise in your community. So then you and Prabhupada Pran come together, right? And you become Prabhupada Pran, and Prabhupada Pran becomes you, and you start telling him, well, you know, I got all these problems in the temple, you know, we have the overhead and things are falling apart, and, you know, so, you know, so it hooks to Joe Prabhu. That's why sometimes I ask you to do this and that, and, you know, and then it's Prabhupada's Pran's turn, and then he becomes you, and you become him. And so he's saying, you know, well, you know, I'm an artist and I like to do things. And listen, I've been doing Sankirtan for so many years. So you both, you're going to have to enter one another's head. I think that'd be a fantastic exercise to do for so many of you, and just play one another's part. I think that would be so helpful. Fantastically helpful. You want to try it someday?
Yeah.
I think you try it and just let me know how it goes. It could be like, it could be a real game changer. Who knows?
Could I ask another question?
Yes.
Thanks for that answer, by the way. That was I took some notes as you were speaking. That'll be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So accepting things or accepting people as they are, it doesn't necessarily mean that we accept that there's no need or point in trying to improve, does it? Because sometimes we think, oh, we just have to accept people for what they are, and that seems like it's maybe a good start. But should it just be left at that?
I think every situation is going to be different, right? Because some people, the way they are, could be a problem. Like, well, just accept me the way they are. Yeah, but you go around killing everybody, so I can't. So that's there. But I was referring to more of like, this is how I process things, you know, like, you know, if you have kids, you know, if you want to get them to do something, sometimes you have to use different tactics, because you can't say, okay, if you don't do this, you're not going to get dinner. And they're like, wow, I'm not even hungry anyway. And then they slam their door. You know? So that didn't work. But that what you think, but if that's what my parents did for me and it worked on me. So then I realized, okay, this is the way they are. It doesn't work because they're different from me. So that's what I was referring to. Not necessarily that we tolerate them doing something wrong, but how they process, like what motivates them, you know? So maybe, you know, some devotees, like they'll say, you know what motivates me? Just get heavy and tell me what to do and tell me when it needs to be done by, because if you don't tell me when it needs to be done by, I'll never get it done. So they've just revealed to you exactly how they want to be told, what inspires them, right? The devotees have told me that. And other devotees have told me, you know, if you're heavy, it doesn't work for me. But if you're supportive and encouraging and kind, that's what works for me. So you have to know what works for people. And if you don't, you can ask them, you know, like, you know, Prabhu, this project, you know, you're working on a long time and it's not getting done. So it's like, what can I do to inspire you? Is there, you know, a way you'd be more inspired, or am I not inspiring you, or something like that? So you try to understand what's the language that best works for people, because it's different for different people. You know, some people I've seen, maybe it's a more of a female thing. I don't know. It's not. It doesn't. I've not only seen it with women, but it's quite often. If you show care, if you show attention, you show affection, you give, you show concern, then they just want to reciprocate. I think that's human nature in general, of course, not just female. And so you don't have to force. You're just taking care of them, and then they say, "What can I do? I want to pay back because you take care of me." So that's, certain people are like that. They'll just reciprocate just because they're taken care of. And so you kind of have to feel that, because maybe according to you, if you tell them what to do, when to do it, and when it needs to be done, that should be enough. And then, but they come back later and say, well, you know, the way you said it, I kind of took offense, so I just didn't do it. And you're thinking, well, that's wrong. But it's just the way they respond. And so you have to find out how to deal with it. You know, if they're breaking principles or not following standards, yeah, that's a totally different thing. But I wasn't referring to that. I was referring to the methodology that would inspire. And it's going to be different for different people. And I'll give you an example. There was a young man in the temple I was president, and he was a little loose with the women. And the women came to me and complained about him. So I spoke to him. I tried to explain in detail, logically, that this is wrong, why it's wrong, what will be, you can't do this, it's just wrong. But he was very misbehaved and it didn't work. So I spent a little more time very nicely explaining everything. It didn't work. You know what worked? I told him, I said, if you don't stop doing this, you're out of the temple. You can't stay here. That day he stopped, because that's the way he works. Me, I work more logically. I want to be explained to. With him, that didn't motivate him. What motivated him is like, you do this or else. Your career in this temple is finished. And he didn't want to leave the temple. And therefore, he changed. So that's my point. And if I do that with someone else, that won't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
That's not easy. I'll tell you, it's not easy to do, but it's necessary. You have to pick up on signals of how you can tell how people relate to you. What would be the best way to motivate them? You know, some people, like, they're not doing well, they're distracted, they're lazy, this and that, weak. sometimes for them, just boom, it's just like, okay, you have to stop doing this. This is wrong. What are you doing? Come to your senses. Shake them up. That might be good for some people. But if you do it on the wrong person, then it's going to backfire. And if you're all lovey-dovey, compassionate on some people, they just take advantage of it and do nothing. So you've seen that, right?
Yeah. Sometimes someone says, "Oh, I don't like you being forceful," so you be very nice, and then it's just basically a way where they can just keep you off their case, so they can just continue floating around.
Yeah. So, well, in a temple community, I think we may have talked about this. You have standards. You have codes of ethics and so forth. So if someone's not following them, then that has to be brought up to their attention. So they can't just wiggle their way out indefinitely, because you have boundaries within which everyone has agreed to work.
Mm-hmm.
Ah. It's not easy, but if you practice, you'll get better at it. But you can, I don't think it's a bad idea to ask them, well, I want to inspire you and I want to help you. What would be the best way? And they'll say, well, if you do it this way. And you might say, but I did it that way. It didn't work. And they might say, well, I'm different now, or you didn't do it exactly that way, or you did it that way, but you also did it this way. And I was discouraged. So if you do it this way, I'll be very inspired and I'll be able to do more. And so then you try it and you see. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you say, well, I thought I did it that way, but I see it's not working. So what's going on? And then you discuss it. And maybe they'll just say, oh, I'm having difficulty. You didn't do anything wrong. You want to figure out the best way to deal with everybody. And everybody's different. Right? Prabhupada, he very rarely got mad at women. It was all reserved for men, and generally it was reserved for the leaders. So, a woman would have to do something pretty bad for him to get angry. So he knew women don't respond well to being chastised, but some men respond very well to it.
Mahatma Prabhu,
Yes.
is it a talent? Like some people are singers, some people are good at football. Is it a talent to be able to, like you worked out
Right.
with that guy that wasn't working, and you tried, so you got heavy with him, it worked?
Uh-huh.
Is that a talent?
I think the nature of management is that it's a talent, yes, but I think it can be learned, and I think that for some people it's going to be harder to learn than others, but I think everybody can learn it. And I think awareness is where it starts, like we're talking about it now, right? So being aware is a beginning. Some people are just better at it, but you can learn. Like you may not be a good husband or you may not be a good wife, but you can learn, right?
Yeah.
So, And it may also have to do with paradigms. Like we be working under a certain paradigm, right? Like, okay, well, this is the paradigm. It's a temple. I'm a leader. It should be like this or that. But one of the things that I think is obvious, or should be somewhat obvious, but I've confirmed from studying, is that because things change so much in the world and people think so differently, like every generation, that what they find in the corporate world is that what worked 50 years ago in terms of managerial structures and how you deal with people and so forth, it doesn't work today because people don't think like that. There's more of an egalitarian mood. Back in 50 years, it was more autocratic. You know, somebody's in charge, he tells everybody what to do, and that was just what they expected, and that was normal. Now, in the books I read about corporate management, they say that if you try to do that in most corporations, it doesn't work well. So I think we have to consider that also. You know, we have a paradigm, you know, ISKCON 1982, you know, it was like this, and we were so successful, and we were fired up, and now it's like, oh, not like it used to be, and devotees aren't so fired up. But we may be applying the same paradigm, and that paradigm worked in that context, but it doesn't work now, and that's why people aren't responding. Whereas a different paradigm, they would respond. You know, you can see with preaching, we don't preach exactly the way we preached in 1985 because people are different. There's different interests. There's different awareness. People are more open. People aren't just joining religious movements per se. They're exploring. And the people, the teachers who are doing the best are the ones who are most aware of how people think. So it's the same with management. We have to adjust to the mentality of people. So I think that could be part of the problem. Maybe you know how to manage, but you only know how to manage in that style that worked, that used to work, but it doesn't work all the time now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's not just for ISKCON, that's everywhere. And that's obvious, you know, the way the younger generation thinks. Much different than the way the CEO who's 70 years old thought when he was 20. So he can't deal with them like he would want to be dealt with, or like he was dealt with. So I think that's super important. And another thing is, if we're not successful in our relationships, or if we're not successful in motivating devotees, or we're not successful in anything, the best thing we can do is think, what can I do to make this work, rather than thinking, well, I'm not successful because this devotee is like this, or I'm not successful because this situation. And on the surface, it may appear to be true, but it's better to think, how could I be more successful in this situation? What could I do to be successful? Because what I'm doing isn't working. And even if you say, but I'm doing the right thing, then I would say, but if you're doing the right thing and it's not working, how could you say that's the right thing? Well, I'm sitting straight and I'm pronouncing properly and I'm not falling asleep, you know, but I have no taste, you know, but I'm doing it right. No, you must be doing something wrong. Because if you did it right, you'd have a taste. So, you know, well, nobody likes me and nobody's inspired, but I'm just, you know, but I'm managing everything correctly and I'm giving them their assignments and their duties. And okay, so now I have to look, okay, how could I do this in a way that they'll become inspired? That's the best way to think. And so don't think I'm successful just because I do the right thing, but think I'm successful because I'm getting the results that I want. Not just because I do the right thing and don't get the results. Oh, I taught everything and all my students failed the test. Well, I guess you didn't teach everything. No, but I did. You can listen to the recording. It's all there. Well, you didn't teach it in a way that they got it, even though you did teach it. So whose fault is it? You go, oh, it's their fault. No, it's your fault, because a better teacher would have come in and got them to learn it. So I think that's how we have to see things as leaders. And husbands and wives and fathers and mothers. Well, I read the book on parenting and I did it exactly, and my kids are like all going crazy. Well, so what? You know, the patient died and your operation was a success. Congratulations. So that's a big problem, you know, doing it by the book, but not getting the result. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think it's common sense. It's just in religious organizations, there's a fear of changing because we kind of think whatever we used to do must be like the parampara. And in some cases, it's true. It is parampara and you can't change it. Even if you could change it to get a better result, you can't, because, you know, it's 16 rounds, 4 principles. Well, it was only 4 rounds and 3 principles. We could initiate, you know, 100 devotees tomorrow. Okay, that's true, but we can't. So some things you can't change, but other things we think, oh, you can't change. No, you can change some things. Some things aren't working, so you can change them. Right? So we have to, you know, not be stuck in thinking, well, this is, you know, the way it always worked. Yeah, but if it's not working now, then we have to discuss, can we change this? So it does, so we do get the results we want.
That's quite heavy.
Why?
Because
that we
guru,
can't change things?
well, a
That's
guru
heavy?
could have then you blame the guru for the way the disciples behave. The guru may have tried, like Srila Prabhupada, he tried really hard,
Yeah.
and some of the disciples didn't behave the right way. So you could say, well, then he couldn't have been such a good, you know, he should have done it better. But there must be a cut-off point where the guru or the person in charge has done the best he can, and you can't hold
That's
him.
there also. They're both there. And I would even be so bold as to say, sometimes a guru, like another guru, like a Siksha guru, gets a better result than a Diksha guru, because he knows better how to deal with that person, or he understands them. So, but as you say, the other side is also true. That person, it may be solely the problem of the person, and nothing you can do is going to help. But I don't think that should be our first assumption. I think that should be a later assumption. So it's 2:50. We've gone an hour and 15 minutes. Is that enough? You get your money's worth, or what?
We certainly got our money's worth. Didn't pay anything. Yeah,
Well, because you don't pay, I don't have to give a money back guarantee. It's always easier for me to teach or do kirtan or anything when I'm not getting paid. If I'm getting paid, I'm like, oh, there's an expectation. Now, this is going to have to be really good and well prepared, and so forth. So I think sometimes my best presentation is when I'm not getting paid, because I'm so open and free that I can do anything. All right, so that was good. Hope that helped.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you. It's some things we can put into practice.
Yeah, put those exercises into practice and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
okay, we'll do that and let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I'd be anxious to hear. And you and Hoksija play it, and if you like it, then you can start doing it with other devotees.
Okay.
All right, super.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna. Sai
Thanks for
Prabhupada.
your time.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.
No.
See you next time,
Hare Krishna, Hare
everyone.
Bol.
All glories to Prabhupada.
Hare